Hi, my name is Kier from Zero Hour, performing my oration Information Anxiety. KFC or Popeyes, homework or forensics, KU or K-State. Now, that's not even a question. Life throws plenty of choices at us, and at times some may seem more difficult than others, especially with the vast amount of information at our fingertips. With the growth in technology, we've seen a vast impact on society never before seen that creeps its way into every point in day-to-day life. For example, just the other week I was assigned a paper over the complex relationship between Britain and France, and while I thought I'd be getting more intense battles, somehow including tea and baguettes, in reality, what I got was my 5-year-old niece giving me quite an earful every 5 seconds. I'd try to do my research and then she'd interject with a little comment or remark. And while I found that it was quite entertaining that she'd want to engage with me, it really didn't help me focus on my overall goal. Then, to add insult to injury, my mother then came in, told me that I had to do the dishes and that I had to clean my room. Panicked, I retreated back to my room where, thankfully, I finished the paper on time. Though this has become a common occurrence in my life, as I'm sure it has in yours as well, oftentimes distractions and constant interruptions keep us from focusing on our overall goal. But to stay productive, our minds must stay focused, and while I tried to mentally shut out all overlying influences, life kept piling on new information to keep me from focusing on my overall goal. This idea was first popularized by Professor Bertram Gross in his 1964 work, The Managing of Organizations, in which he described information overload as the process when the amount of input into a system exceeds its processing capacity, and thus, as a result, a reduction in decision quality will occur. Though, to put this into the context of our minds, when we are faced with a copious bounty of information, oftentimes our mind can find it difficult to make the right decision, and thus, information overload stands in the way of progress. Within this speech, we will be looking over 3 main factors. First, we'll be looking at the problem of information overload and how it stands in our society today. Second, looking at a few examples of this problem. And then third and finally, providing a simple solution. To really get a sense of this issue, we have to look back, and considering the vast majority of information, news, and technology that is shared is online, we must really hone in on this certain sector. And it was shown that between the years of 1975 and 2009, processing speeds nearly doubled every sequential year. What's more important is that this not only symbolizes a shift from the more physical to the electronic, it also displays a social and cultural shift that we are starting to see as well. And as we start to see more and more people become engrossed within this online culture, we are really starting to see real problems related to mental health take effect, as was displayed by researchers Avery Holton and Sai Chi, who discussed the psychological effects that news and news media has on the general public consumer in today's world, in which they stated that news consumers today feel overwhelmed with the amount of news they are faced with, whether it be over such problems such as gender news interests or the specific use of certain news platforms. It shows different varying degrees of said overload, but what can be seen is that with this cultural shift that we are taking, more information, news, and media are being consumed on online platforms and creating mental health issues within the day-to-day life in which we exist. And this is important, as Daniel Stockhausen, professor of ecology at UCL, adds on and stresses on the severity of the situation, stating that hierarchical regression data analysis indicates higher levels of perceived cyber-based overload caused poorer amounts of health, higher levels of stress, and less time devoted to contemplative activities. So, the real psychological effects are taking place not only in our mental sphere, but also affecting us physically as well. And oftentimes, when we are overwhelmed with so much information, it can become cause for concern for our brain to try and process all of it. And when it doesn't have enough time, underlying health issues related to stress like apathy and depression can quickly take hold and manipulate our mind into making the wrong choices. But to really get a sense of this issue, we have to look at a few examples. And I think there are a few within everyday life that are often going overlooked. But hey, Humans are weird creatures, man. If you look back at the psychological database we possess, you'd be lost for years and years. And I've grown up in a time when seeing people through the screen has become the norm and everyone's an expert just because they know how to use Google. But oftentimes, just because information is present doesn't always mean that it's useful or correct. For example, a study in 2000 conducted by psychologists Mark Lepper and Sharon Ligar overviewed the effects that information overload has over choice. Within this experiment, consumer groups were told to pick out a jam of choice in which there were two options. Option number one was a jam of large quantity with very little variety, and option number two of large variety with very little quantity. And the interesting thing is, consumers chose that of large quantity over that of large variety, showing that oftentimes oversaturation of information can be detrimental to the decision-making process. Not only that, marketers have been using this for years and years to try and manipulate the public into buying certain products. But this isn't only shown within the world of marketing. This can also be attributed to a few of the phenomenon going on in social media. And social media has specifically been created as a platform not only to create and share information, but specifically targets my generation. It might just be one of the most impactful creations of the 21st century. As we are starting to see this shift into online culture, engrossing into this online culture has become cause for concern for information overload primarily. As our news and consumption of media can be most times negative, it can be a real problem for many consumers on the platform. Not to mention the effects of social isolation on these properties as well. But I don't like talking problems without talking a few solutions. And I think that information overload, while being such a common problem, might actually be solved with such a common solution, in which I propose three. Starting off with number one, drum roll please. Taking a break. I know. Crazy idea. But it's true. Taking a break has been shown to help improve and maintain your performance throughout the day, helping you get over the minute stress and monotony of day-to-day life that is often found. But what is important is that you're allowing your brain time to catch up. And that is the real main cause of information overload. Oftentimes, we find ourselves so wound up within the workday, we don't find time to decompress, and thus we are quickly overwhelmed. But what taking a break can provide is making time for yourself, for your brain to try and recover. But not everyone has enough time in their day to really just take spontaneous breaks. So that's where you could try option number two, which is meditation. Meditation for some can be life-altering, and for others it could just be a nice mental activity. But what's important is that when we observe meditation, it's an activity that specifically targets the betterment of your mental health. You can provide time throughout the week to help improve your own mental state and try and create peace of mind, which can be very difficult within the world we exist in. And if you don't like that, you could always try number three, which is my personal favorite, and that's working out. And before you say anything, look, I get it. I'm not the most swole guy out there on the block, but hey. Physical exercise has been shown to help release endorphins within the brain, increasing your confidence while decreasing your stress and helping you mitigate stress and anxiety levels throughout the week. Could be as simple as just going for a jog, or you could try powerlifting, but whatever works. All of these options have been created not only as a path to help overcome the issue at hand, but also provide better steps to trying to create a more structured and easy lifestyle. So, within this speech today, we've looked at the problem of information overload, overviewed a few examples of it within day-to-day life, and looked at a few solutions. Information overload might just be one of the most important issues that is going to face my generation in years to come. As we ingratiate ourselves further within this online culture, we are going to start to see more people become affected by overloading of information. But hey, I like to think that oftentimes when we face a common problem, we can face it with a common solution. And I like to think it's like my niece always used to tell me after a good nap. You always choose KFC over Popeyes.